When I came from Germany 30-some years ago, I realized on the East Coast I did not see so much First Nation culture, and I didn't know why that was the case. I believe it's very important that First Nations get more recognition in North America and the world, and so that's a big part of what we're doing here.
We bring our old ancestors' ways into today, just to keep that alive.
The meaning behind my art would be about the residential school survivors and missing and murdered Indigenous women. I talk about things that are happening in my life at the moment.
My spirit name is Miskike No Den, which is medicine wind. So then when I have my name, I felt like I have to share whatever I know and teach the young kids. Friends United is reviving our culture back.
Here you feel supported and nurtured. Like we all, at some point in our life, need that moment that somebody says, I believe in you.
The center just helps us be a community within just artists.
Friends United is a team of many people with the same idea to work together constructively to honor First Nations and to make sure they have their place in history and to really promote peace, friendship and reconciliation.
Hello and welcome to the Friends United International Convention Centre in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, Canada. My guest today is Patrick Lamey. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here, and I'd love for you to tell the people out there in our audience exactly what your involvement has been with this centre and with this initiative.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to spend this time with you, because what I find about this center is that it's a gathering place. And I've never had the pleasure of actually being in your company before, but I've known you for years, you know, like so many. And so this is our first chance to gather together, and I just think that that's just a perfect example of what this place has been like for so many people. And it's just lucky for us. It is about connection. So who would have thunk it? And that's an expression that comes up quite frequently with people who live nearby here. So just for people who are reviewing, I live basically 25 minutes away from here in a town called Port Hawkesbury. And where we are, of course, is we're out the old route number 4, past the area of Cleveland and on our way to Grand Anse. And this is rural Cape Breton. You know, it's definitely rural Cape Breton.
No question about it.
And so to suddenly then just arrive at this location, even when you drive in, you're still not sure. But when those doors open and you walk through, you're just astounded by the scope of the place.
Every person who walks through that door has that same reaction.
They should take a picture.
Drops. Yes, they should.
Yes.
We should have a camera trained on that door.
Absolutely.
So that you can get the jaw dropping.
Because I've even had the pleasure of being here with people who aren't, you know, that quickly moved by things, and I've seen them react that way. So that's pretty, you know, that says a lot. Mm-hmm. So the question was, how have I been involved with this? My first connection to this place would be in my role as a lawyer, as a notary. Mm-hmm. I've been the legal representative for Rolf Bouman's real estate companies. And so my first introduction to this place was in a very two-dimensional way, looking at survey plans and mapping systems and deeds. Wow. And researching the title and working on titles and so forth. So my first connection to this place was in a very abstract kind of way.
So will you give me an honest answer when I ask you, did you at some point think, he's crazy? Did you look at what his vision was and go, what?
By this time, I had spent enough time with Rolf Bouman to know that he thinks bigger than I think the average person, and And I think that that's really how humanity, advances anyway, because we're so blessed with people who kind of think beyond the scope of just, what's in front of them, that they have vision. And so he had a vision for this place, and I guess I knew him well enough to believe that he saw something in it that I wasn't going to have the capacity to see. So the short answer, though, is, oh yeah.
Yeah.
But there was also a sense of anticipation about, okay, what is he going to turn this former fish hatchery into? And I never would have imagined it.
It's pretty incredible. And when I hear you say that, I think about the idea that visionaries who have changed the world are people about whom others would have said they're crazy, or there's no way that's ever going to happen. And they have impossible dreams and they make them come true. Yeah. And I think that really fits. That description fits Rolf.
Yeah. And I think its timing is excellent as well. We're on Cape Breton Island. It's a beautiful place. It's world renowned for its beauty. And for those of us who reside here, it's sometimes easy to forget what's in your own backyard. I extend that to all of Nova Scotia and the Maritimes and Atlantic Canada. But sometimes when you're here as well, you can sometimes be unaware of all of the progressive things that are happening as well. And so what I like about this is that there are some really neat things happening in our region right now that are being advanced by visionaries, who are thinking outside of the box and seeing the great potential, somewhat from that perspective of living locally but thinking globally. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because of their world experiences that they're able to bring some new ideas that maybe those of us who are a little bit more stayed here may not have necessarily ever been able to see for a former fish hatchery building.
It's so exciting.
It's really exciting. So for those of us who are here and it's just all happening, I think, together with a number of other really, really exciting things on the island, this is a really neat time to be here in this moment and to be in this building and in the context of just who knows what's happening.
So you've been along on the whole journey.
I have. I've seen this at various stages. I won't bore you with all the details, but I've seen it at various phases. So this current phase is just remarkable.
It's pretty special that it was a place of fertility. Yeah. It was a place of creation because it was a fish hatchery. Mm-hmm. And I love that sort of parallel, because look at all the ideas being hatched here and the creativity being expressed.
That's a great parallel. I love that.
There's something meaningful about that connection, I think. Yeah. So when did you realize that Rolf was going to really create a bridge between cultures? Was there a moment when you went, oh, okay, that's what this is about?
There might have been many moments, but I think that if I were to focus on one in particular, it was less about maybe this space and more about the space that he had created, not in a distance, but in a closeness. The relationships that I was seeing him establish with First Nations friends, and how impressed I was with the fact that he had established such powerful friendships. There's a lot, I think, that has to pass between people to be able to kind of get beyond that surface level relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think you've had an opportunity to meet with some of the artists, perhaps, and maybe you've observed it as well. But there's a bond there, and not everybody is going to have the privilege to earn that kind of level of relationship, respect. And I think that Rolf Bouman has also been privileged himself enough to be able to, even in the busyness of his business life, to be able to take the time to slow down and truly reflect on the importance of our First Nations neighbors, mm-hmm. and their connection to place, to nature, to each other, to this world, and beyond, and their belief systems and their values and so forth. We're all so busy in this life today, and I think that the majority of us probably all have a surface level appreciation. We want to say that we're respectful because we value it, mm-hmm. we truly do, But I think that Rolf has perhaps had the extra privilege in being able to dig deeper and to be able to be blessed really with receiving the lessons from his friends, and that's actually when I started to see him establish those types of relationships, where I think that there was also a respectful belief in him, that he was someone that wasn't leading anyone along, that there could be mutual respect and mutual productivity, and that's when I thought, oh, he's doing something really unique here that I haven't seen in a while, or if ever.
And that's right, if ever, because it's an unusual level of commitment and generosity. Yeah. And that's so it's easy for people to suspect it or to be, put off guard by that kind of level of pure generosity is how I see it.
Absolutely, yeah. And for that reason, I mean, I feel blessed and very, very privileged to be able to play a very small role and to be along for the ride of it, and hopefully I'll be able to also someday fully appreciate how relevant and significant all of this is, how special this is.
It's like you're riding on his purpose and passion bus.
Yeah. Right? Get on board.
Yeah, right on. Here we go. I also love the fact that he came to Canada with a sense of reverence for our First Nations people, and perhaps more, than the average Canadian.
I think you're right.
Definitely more than the average Canadian. Let's just say it. And that's a special connection that I was intrigued by. That because of his German background and the German lens on the Canadian First Nations, that he came really intrigued by our artwork. And the history and the rich culture that they represent. So I have been very moved by what he's created here, but I also know that you can tell us a little more information about what else he's done other than these paintings on the wall. This is a place, but the initiative is bigger. And for instance, I know that Rolf, of course, is a land developer, and there's been an angle there with land development and paintings. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I think basically he recognizes that this adventure that he's been on. Certainly he has a strong entrepreneurial part of him, and he has been very lucky in the decisions and the paths that he has taken. But even along that path, it seems as though he's never really lost too much touch with a connectedness to nature and a connectedness to other people as well. Let's not kid ourselves. Real estate development is a tough business, and as a result of that, sometimes you're going to be, knocking heads from time to time. But I think that even in the midst of all of the noise, he still seems to retain some kind of connectivity to these things I just talked about: nature and wildlife and relationships with people, and I think that these relationships that he's established, particularly with the First Nations artists and his First Nations friends, has been extremely important to him. I think that perhaps, he would speak better for himself, but I get a sense that he feels a certain kind of groundedness that perhaps some people, when they get a little bit accelerated on that entrepreneurial path, that sometimes they can lose touch with. Being grounded. So that on its own, I think, is very fascinating. So I think he's really shown a great deal of appreciation for the gift that those things have given him. And so he just feels naturally inclined to try to prop up the First Nation artist people. And if he feels like giving them an opportunity to be connected to the land, by virtue of giving them access to property and that sort of thing, right? In exchange for all of their creativeness.
So he has actually exchanged land for paintings?
Yeah. And so, and we have to kind of get outside of our sort of, Western European mindset of, I hold a deed in my hand and it's valuable and I can liquidate that anytime I want to, or I can leverage it, all these sorts of things. And these people, I don't think we will ever really truly appreciate it. I'm far from being any kind of expert on the subject, but my understanding is that I come from a Scottish, Gaelic Irish background, and so I think there's an interesting parallel there too, is that I understand, and now all my Gaelic friends are going to get mad at me for even trying this, but I've always been fascinated with the fact that there's actually no word in Gaelic to have something. Things are at you, agad, agam.
Yes.
And so my understanding is that there's a kind of an interesting comparison there with First Nations people, is that the land is at them. It's so you don't own that land. You don't possess that land. You have a relationship with the land. So, for them to produce from their spirit, from their creativity, something that manifests itself in the form of painting or what have you, for many, many people to enjoy, in many, many ways for a long period of time, if treasured properly, and in exchange for that, to give them the opportunity to feel that rootedness to a special space, that's pretty powerful, I think, so. And I don't think I even know the half of it, really, to be honest with you. I'm just trying my best to articulate it, so.
Do you know of any other deals where land has been exchanged for paintings?
Well, it's probably happening, but I don't know. I mean, I'm a songwriter, but nobody's ever offered me a deed for any song I've written. So.
I think it's innovative, and it's a beautiful way of supporting an artist and giving them an opportunity to be landowners. It's pretty special.
Yeah, and it's done in a very, very, what I observed from it was that it was not something that was done on the quick. It was almost, I think it kind of just evolved, and it just sort of became a natural decision, that was almost mutual, I think, than anything else. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that Rolf would ever have wanted to give title to somebody if it didn't have meaning to them. Yes. Do you know what I mean? It would have had completely the wrong context. It would have been more sort of a commodity approach to things, but this was something completely different. This was sort of love for love in a way, if I can put it that way, right? So
two things of great value exchanged. Period. Right. Tell me about your law firm's investment in Friends United in a way.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so we it's been a pleasure to represent the land development companies and of course to be the lawyers for Friends United, along with other very smart and talented lawyers who've also provided other advice in various aspects of it in this very unique operation. I don't even know what to call it, and I love the fact that I don't know necessarily what to call it.
It's hard to define.
It is, and I don't know how to define what it can evolve to, and that's part of the excitement too. I mean, we lawyers want to compartmentalize everything, so rigidly and everything like that, and I think it's healthy for us to be, presented with things that don't fit in the in these categories. I think that's really cool. Causes us to step back and reflect. But so we've provided legal representation. I mean, I'm part of a 10-lawyer law firm that has an office it's been around since 1961, and we have an office in Port Hawkesbury and an office in Antigonish.
You might as well say the name and get a plug.
Okay, it's called EMM Law. Previous name was Evans McIsaac McMillan, and I'm one of the co-owners, co-managers, and along with 3 other people, and So I've been on for probably the last 16 years, and in that time frame, a lot of my work has been geared towards the land development piece, but inevitably it's ebbed and flowed. And coming back to your original question about this place, I mean, originally it was with regards to the the work, the title work and so forth, but then came the art, and then there came questions surrounding the artwork and how to respectfully define the relationship of the artists, and maybe even in a contractual manner. What about intellectual property topics and all these sorts of things? And so again, we're looking at the legal concepts, the economic concepts. They all naturally have to be addressed, but every step of the way it was always done with a kind of a loving hand. I want to know, he wanted to know about these topics, but he also then took that knowledge and information and used it in the context that he's been trying to develop this, with a very, very respectful, kind of meaningful, creative space. So it's an interesting balance.
But I understand you've also made your office a creative space.
And so we have. So we're really fortunate. We have this beautiful building down on historic waterfront in Port Hawkesbury, and lots of walls, and a spiral staircase. It's a pretty dramatic entrance when you come in, I guess, and it's the space I've been walking into for 26 years, and I still don't take it for granted, but. It was designed, the building itself, to look like an old home back in the day when, the waterfront of Port Hawkesbury was bustling. Back when you wanted to come onto and off of Cape Breton Island, you got on a car ferry down at the government wharf, and you went back and forth between Port Hawkesbury and Mulgrave. And that's literally just behind our office space. We look onto the Strait of Canso from our big conference room. Wow. So yeah, there's about 60 of these pieces of artwork in our office right now, and they're from about a half dozen or more of the artists themselves, and they are, as you know, they are special. They're dynamic, the artwork. They, in many cases, are actually depicting a scene in a story. And again, if you're a busy person and you're just rushing by, you probably don't realize that. But if you slow down long enough, and of course I've had the pleasure of even having a few of the First Nations artists there to explain to me, that's the scene in the oral story when this happens.
And don't you love it? It makes it such a rich experience.
Absolutely. It just takes you to a whole other place with this artwork. And so it's in our conference rooms and in our own individual offices and along the hallways as well. Some of it's extremely playful. There's some artwork that is challenges you to what do you see? It's almost like a Rorschach, kind of print and that sort of thing too. So there could be different interpretations of the artwork as well. So it's kind of abstract in that regard. And then some of it, of course, is very, very stylized. At the end of the day, these are individual artists as well. And they're all on their own individual paths too. And I try not to forget that. They are human beings. They are their own people. They've been shaped and formed by their own individual experiences. And this just happens to be one of those pieces of artwork that they've produced at a given period of time in that adventure.
What's the reaction of people when they walk into your law firm and they see this?
The reaction of people is it stops them in their tracks. It causes them to physically walk up to the wall. Sometimes I feel like I'm in an art gallery. That's awesome. Yeah. We, as the owners of the law firm, of course, could sit down, have long meetings, and decide, who are we? What do we want to represent? What kind of tone do we want to set in our office space? And where are we going to go find that art, those images and so forth, right? And I can remember having lots of conversations, let's go out and get, really classic black and white pictures of the historic courtrooms, courthouses that our law firm, the lawyers from our law firm would have, gone to throughout the years before those buildings are gone. We could have gone there, and then out of the blue, it wasn't us. It basically came to us through conversation. That's the other thing I love about this, is that a lot of it wasn't even premeditated. It was just like, well, this is just the natural thing.
It's so organic.
It was organic, yeah. And so I love the fact that people come in and they quite often will just simply be gobsmacked. And one of the things they'll say is that it's bold, it's colorful, it's dynamic. we're fortunate. I consider myself to be very blessed, to be able to practice law, and because it gives me the privilege of meeting people, lots of different people, and Cape Breton is a place that people want to visit, and so sometimes we will have individuals that it will turn out that they're quite knowledgeable about the art world, and they won't necessarily let on to you about that, or that they are artists themselves. And so that conversation is always really fascinating too. But I have yet to have anybody say anything less than, this is fantastic.
But it takes you to a different level of conversation with people. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that, yeah.
Oh, yes, indeed, yeah.
So they probably show more of themselves because of their reaction to it.
I think so, yeah. And I think the other thing too is that, I can't forget about exactly what I do. I mean, this interview is not about me, but I think it's more about the phenomenon. The majority of people who enter into a law firm are probably resenting the fact they have to go there. I might as well say it because I recognize it.
Gotta go to work, gotta make money.
Well, it's either because somebody is going to, charge me a lot of money to do something that I can't do for myself. Yeah. So that's usually not putting somebody in a very good mood. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they've got a little trouble now that they've got to resolve, and so they want to go from instead of from A to B, they're going from minus A to back to A again. They're trying to just get themselves back to balance. Mm-hmm. And so, and if they've never been in a law firm before, and all joking aside, it can be extremely anxiety provoking for people. So I've really been quite pleased to see that it's a really kind of pleasing distraction. And so wouldn't that be nice for the artists to realize that they're playing that role for people who probably have a lot of trouble in their lives, and indirectly they're actually giving themselves a little bit of a pleasurable distraction in the midst of that context. And
that's a beautiful perspective. There's also a courtroom, a special courtroom for which that could be said.
Absolutely. So I'm not a criminal law lawyer, but I've been following this story, and I would not be able to tell it as well as some of my peers. And I know there's other people in the judiciary of Nova Scotia who are associated with this, but I will just sort of single out my friend and Port Hawkesbury resident, Judge Laurie Halfpenny McQuarrie, who together with her peers and representatives of legal aid and Crown prosecution and the Justice Department and the government, in this province right now, we have an extremely unique courtroom. It's very much unlike anything. I think there are some similar ones in other parts of Canada, but this one I think really is extremely distinctive.
Where is it?
So it's in a First Nations community called Wagmatcook, and which is between Wakaba and Badek, and it's I believe located in their center there, and so. What they have done there is they've created essentially what is referred to as a Gladue court. And so Gladue was the name, as I understand it, of an individual First Nations person who did go through the criminal court system. In general, what I can say is that as much smarter people than me are aware that there have been recommendations that have come down. Interestingly enough, a lot of it in Nova Scotia was triggered by the awful story of Donald Marshall Jr. And his wrongful conviction, which is something that should resonate for all Nova Scotians as one of the lowest moments of our judicial system and criminal system. But hopefully what came out of that were a lot of important lessons learned. And so in addition to that, there have been a number of studies and, of course, reconciliation reports and recommendations. And one of them is this Gladue report that's basically saying to the governments in Canada that we need to have an alternative manner of doing justice for First Nations people. And they deserve it. So this court, in the way it's designed, is a reflection also of basically a number of the main things that these kind of courts needed to be. And they needed to be contextualized. There needed to be proper interpretation. There needed to be more of a role of the elders. There needed to be more of a role for healing circles and sentencing circles, so that the justice that is, rolled out in cases where clearly there is guilt, that it's effective, right? Because the kind of deterrence, that we would ordinarily just sort of made out in the form of incarceration and so forth, it's just not necessarily going to have the impact that we would really want to see.
So it's a restorative approach?
It is a restorative approach, and there's a number of other things that, if only I could channel my friend right now, I'd be able to articulate it so well. But the main thing I wanted to say was that in addition to it being a circular room, yes, with the dynamics that we're usually accustomed to of the, the raised up, bench, that's all stripped away. And it's a circular environment. And the artwork, the artists here, is up on the walls. Wow. And in particular, there are the images of the animals that represent the 7 ways, teachings.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Are there, and that is, and we can see them even, in here, we can see them around here too. So they're very prominent on the walls when you walk in. And the fact that the room is designed so differently, it's not like any courtroom you'll ever find. And so the space and the artwork plays such an important role in that space. It's sending a message to all participants, yes, in this unique judicial space, that this is an environment where justice is going to be done more effectively and more respectfully. Nobody gets off. Wrong is wrong. What's not moral is not moral. But perhaps the individual who has been charged and convicted, the lessons learned are going to be that much more meaningful, and there will be a lot more restorativeness to the whole thing. And that person may very well go out and make the world a much better place as a result of, the justice and the sentencing and so forth. So, and the artwork is there. There was a neat story about that Laurie Halfpenny McCory, Judge McCory, told me, which was that there was an elder who came to visit this place. He had heard about it, and there had been, I guess, one of the chiefs had actually said to her a couple of years beforehand, when he knew that they were going to move forward with this. And they had worked with all of the chiefs from the local reserves to develop this very carefully every step of the way. But one of them actually leaned into her and said, "Do it right." And then this elder arrived, after the court had been opened and officially dedicated and had been operating for a while. And he just looked inside. Court wasn't in session. And she saw him, and she said, is there anything I can do for you? How are you? He said, "No." And she said, what do you think? And he said, "I feel at home."
Oh, wow.
So I'm sure that the artwork played a powerful role, and because of the symbolism.
Oh. It feels, by your description to me, it feels like a nest, where there is a sense of safety, but also nurturing. And history and home. In that case, I really love that. It's beautiful.
Definitely. Yeah.
So that's
you should see it.
I will. It sounds like a template as well for others.
I think, yes.
And maybe a documentary of its own. But this place feels like that as well. Yeah. And I know that you've been involved in this whole journey, but you've also had a different perspective because you're a musician.
Yeah.
And you've had the opportunity to perform here. Yeah. So let's first just tell me the list of instruments you play, please, other than your fabulous singing voice.
Well, okay, so First of all, I should just basically say that I grew up in a musical environment.
Welcome to Cape Breton.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was more of the oral tradition than anything else. I mean, I've had a little bit of training along the way, but if my better half heard me say that right now, she'd laugh. So no, truly most of it was just that osmosis process of learning from relatives and just, learning from being in those music sessions and so on. So that's the background that I come from, and I love our music culture here in Cape Breton and the Maritimes and Atlantic Canada, and I love the way that people react to it when they're visiting here. I'm not trying to brag about it. It's not about bragging. I just think that it is a known fact that there is something rich about our music culture in this region, and it's not static. I mean, we've got this beautiful traditional heritage. Can't get enough of it, from my perspective. But I love how it just continues to manifest itself year after year after year. And even our artists that may be participating in different genres, I think are impacted as well by our tradition. I think there's a tinge of our music traditions that kind of, there's an inflection in that. So with that background, I've been playing music since I was 4. I was shoved onto community stages and went to nursing homes and played in the country fairs and stuff like that, and entered into all the contests and things like that growing up. And I spent a good part of my youth in New Brunswick too, and here in Cape Breton, where my beginner, my pioneer, was a Tipperary man who came in 1798 and settled actually only about 40 minutes in the other direction. So anyway, but fast forward to now, once I graduated from law school, I could have and did apply for positions in the larger centers in Nova Scotia, Halifax too, and Fredericton and all. But somebody had told me, you should consider Cape Breton, because all through law school you never stopped talking about Cape Breton. And my Cape Breton friends and my Newfoundland friends, they all said that. They said, you know what, interview with a few firms. So long story short, I did. I interviewed, and the firm I'm with right now actually was the firm I articled with. I've been there ever since. All through those years I was playing music. Always. I was very fortunate to be able to have, employers at the time who really encouraged that. That's all about that elusive work-life balance thing,
and left-right brain balance too.
Absolutely, yeah. And my better half is a musician as well, so it gave us an opportunity to do things together and be involved with the music culture here. So while I'm doing that, I'm singing and I'm writing and playing guitars and fiddle and banjo and mandolin and bagpipes and stuff like that, and just knowing enough to be dangerous kind of thing, But this music cultural area is just a phenomenal place where you can get a chance to mix and match with people, and of course we have lots of visitors too, and they're really, really keen to come and be part of the mix, and you know what I mean? It's a really interesting dance, and so I've been when Rolf naturally wants a lot of the different types of creative expressions to occur in this space, and I already knew that he loved music, so eventually he started to invite musicians that he knew from here to entertain some of his guests that were visiting from elsewhere, and then eventually some of these guests were incredibly talented people as well. So it's pretty phenomenal to be in this space and be jamming with some of your peers from Mabu or Judic or Inverness or Antigonish or whatever, and meanwhile, some of the First Nations artists are actually here in the space painting away while we're performing, right? And so an example would be, of course, our former Premier Rodney MacDonald. He and I would be in here, and he'd be playing fiddle tunes, and I'd be backing him up on the guitar, and he'd say, Patrick, sing a song, so I'd sing a couple songs, and he'd back me up on the fiddle, and yeah.
Can you put into words how it feels to perform in here?
It's not just the space. I mean, the space and all the artwork around you is hugely inspiring. It's hard not to get into your creative side of your brain when you see all of it. It's very inspiring. But when you're in this room and then it's full of people and their faces are glowing and they're being generous because they're giving you the love, right? You can tell that they're equally appreciating this really unique moment in this really unique space. Like, again, who would have thunk it? So
It's joy.
yeah, it is joy, and so I and a lot of the music that I play isn't contrived. It's it's very again kind of organic, and I can make lots of mistakes and not worry about it. I'm not trying to be polished or anything like that. It's the music that my grandfather played, and it's the music that my grandmother sang, and it's probably going to come out differently every time. And so it's kind of neat to do it in this space too, because I think there's I think to a certain degree there's a little bit of free even in the artwork as well. Like there's just
Magic. Say it, Patrick. It's magic.
for that. I was looking for that word.
Talk about magic, but it's magic.
Oh no,
Yeah,
well,
there's magic in the room.
We all need to do that. Yeah. No, there is magic in the room, and that's absolutely. I'm glad you used that expression too, because it reminds me of a time that I traveled to Ireland with a group from the Maritimes that were there on a music exchange, and one of our musical friends kept saying, "It's magic." Yeah. And you're right.
Yeah. Wonderful. So my last question for you is, how do you describe this initiative to people who don't know anything about it? I'm just curious how you encapsulate it, because you're a man who's good with words, and you understand this place like few others, perhaps, having been on the whole journey. So how do you describe it?
It is a unique space of creativity where you feel alive, you want to linger longer, and you want to talk to other people about it while you're here to also hear how they're experiencing it. It's a place that you probably want to come back to more than once, because you just get a sense that it's going to continue to evolve. Almost like you're urging it on to continue to evolve.
You want to be a part of that evolution.
An example of how that's manifested itself is that I had the pleasure of inviting the members of my Rotary Club, because I'm the president of our Rotary Club here in Port Hawkesbury, to have a special social. They had been hearing all these rumors. One of them even lives like 3 kilometers up the road and had never been inside. Wow. But I used the opportunity because it was the time of the year when our district governor was going to come and visit our club, and we wanted to do a social. We wanted to give him a unique opportunity. And we heard that he actually used to live in the Yukon, in the northern part of Canada, and had a strong affinity for our First Nations people in the north. So we just knew it was a natural. And we were right. He loved being here. And when he was here, pretty well sitting right where you're sitting right now, he turned to the executive and he said, "I'm going to challenge the Rotary Club of Port Hawkesbury." And I said, "What is this going to be?"
You leaned in.
Yeah, I leaned in. And he said, as he looked around all the artwork, and he said, "I know you're a really, really small club, but you should submit an application for the Friends United project to be an exhibition during the Rotary International Conference in Hamburg, Germany this year in June." Wow. At what's referred to as the House of Friendship. And of course, we all just said, "Yeah, right." Most of us never even get a chance to go to a Rotary International, like an international conference. We're gonna, we most likely will go to our district conference. It's in beautiful Pictou this year, and actually Rolf Bouman has made some of his artwork available to be exhibited in some of the gathering spaces during that as well, because again, District Governor Rob Christie is such a fan now. Anyway, so the following Sunday, I got up extra early and saw that the application was an online electronic one, and I said, well, let me start to draft this up. And I just started to put together, the language, and of course, this wonderful space has a website that people can, look at. And so that was a natural, it was to link it to that. But what we wanted them to understand was that this project is about, again, raising up the First Nations people of Canada, and giving them a profile internationally in something very unique, creativity, to give people at an international level an opportunity to hear about our First Nations people in a very positive and brilliant and dynamic way, rather than perhaps the opposite. So there was just this little spark that there might be some magic.
I think I know where you're going with this.
So we waited and waited and waited and waited and pretty well assumed it was not going to fly, because there's limited spaces and there's a lot of competition, a long list of people. Rotary clubs across the world want to feature their projects, and their projects, all the projects, have great merit. And, but yeah, we got this email out of the blue one day. Congratulations.
Whew.
Yeah. So that's when I turned to Rolf Bouman and said, this is your baby now. You know, because the little court, you know, we are a small club that often punches above its weight. But this is, and ironically, this is Friends United, and the exhibition space that's a really, really magic thing to visit during the conference is actually called the House of Friendship. So
It's too perfect.
it is, you know, so he's going to do a brilliant job using that space up, bringing some of this artwork along, exhibiting it. They have to be there during the entire time frame, right? So there'll always be somebody there. And First Nation artists will go with, you know, and they'll be there. And I just know, from what I've heard, we didn't talk a lot about it. We don't have to talk about it. That's another documentary altogether. But as a Canadian, I'm fascinated with the fascination of our First Nations and Northern residents and their cultures and their history and so forth that our European friends seem to have.
Yes.
I've often asked them, what is it? And I've heard about, you know, what did you see on television growing up when you saw anything that reflected Canada? It was always kind of fascinating that a lot of it was documentaries about our nature, our wildlife, and our First Nations people. So that's a perspective that they've got, and they're fascinated with it. They can't get enough of it. So this is going to be in Hamburg, you know, and of course people from Rotarians from all over the world, and it's Rotary, you know, and I'm sometimes not very good at flying the banner, but I have to say Rotary's a wonderful organization, and I just think it's such a fantastic fit.
It is. There's such a symbiotic kind of relationship, I can imagine.
Yeah, I think the context is perfect.
I love that story. I'm so glad you told me.
I just had to segue.
Yeah, no, it's really special, and I want to congratulate you and commend you on your role in making this happen, and the support that you've lent along the way, and that you are obviously a great cheerleader, and that matters too. Yeah. So you've had all sorts of different ways you've contributed, and it's magic.
It is magic, and I thank you for the congratulations. I don't know if I'm to be congratulated, because I really still feel like I play a very small role, but you know, the degree to which I'm able to, you know, support and encourage all of the people who participate in this at whatever level, you know, whether it be Rolf Bouman or anyone who's part of this organization, I'm all for it. Like, go, go, go.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
It's official.
Yeah.
Thanks, Patrick, so much.